Chicago, showed me the little insert, and it said Anna Carla Blasi, and he said, go find out everything that you can about Anna Carla Blasi. And by the way, the name wasn't spelled right. Remember you told me that.
So what did you find out?
Her name was Blasi. She started out as Anna Chiarello. She was Rosiglianese from the Salerno province. And I don't know if you can see here, these are some pictures of her. And
Okay, well, go ahead. We're going to have to do this without...
yeah, really. So, if you don't know, Anna Carla Blasi was initially a midwife on the near west side, what we call Little Italy today. She actually didn't live on the near west side. She lived in the first ward, which was east of what we consider Taylor Street now. She lived over around Clark and Dearborn and Polk and Harrison, and she lived in that area. She was definitely in the first ward. But she did her midwifery in the first ward and the 19th ward. 19th ward at that time was Little Italy, Taylor Street and all. As far as writing about her, what I decided to do was I wanted to start with her death, because that's actually where I started my research. When I found out when she died, I was able to go on the internet and get all kinds of information. I'm kind of an amateur genealogist, so I know where to go. And the first thing I found was her death certificate. And I've got a picture of it here. I can pass this around later, but everybody that died in Cook County had to have a death certificate. They had to report it to Cook County. On the death certificate, it tells who your mother was, who your father was, what you died of, when you were born. Just a wealth of information on a death certificate. So if you can find a death certificate, you can work backward and find out a lot of things about people. So I decided to start with her death, and from there I found out where she was born, and actually she was born in Ominano, which is near Ricigliano in the Salerno province. She came here, she was born in about 1859. She came here around 1885, which was pretty early for people from Italy to come to America. I know in my own case, 1888 was the earliest that anyone in my family ever came here. She came here with two of her sisters and her mother. And her mother was Concetta di Feo. I haven't found her father coming over here, but I assume he came over here first, because that was typical then. The father would come over, get a room in a boarding house, and find a job right away. Usually a padrone would hook him up with a job with the city or on the railroad or something. And he'd make enough money, save all his money, and he would send for his family. So when she got here, she was about 17, 18 years old. She worked as a midwife. And she delivered many, many babies in the 19th and the 1st ward. And she rarely took money for that. People didn't have money to pay her anyway. But what she did take was They bring her a chicken, or they bring her a salami, or they bring her something, flowers or whatever, just to say thank you for, you know, taking care of us during the time of my child's birth. A lot of people, a lot of the children died back then also. Cholera was a big deal back then. And cholera is a disease that comes from unsanitary conditions. And so she kind of got into this political arena because she was tired of these children dying from cholera all the time and the unsanitary conditions. The unsanitary conditions came because there was no garbage pickup in Little Italy. They were always stalling. There was no reason to pick up the garbage in Little Italy. Nobody complained to the politicians about it. They kept to themselves. They minded their own business because that's how they had to live. But Anna didn't care for that. So what turned out eventually is all of these people that Anna helped, when Anna told them who to vote for, that's who they voted for. And so the politicians, Hinky Dink McKenna and Bathhouse John Coughlin, who were the two aldermen in the first ward at that time, and probably some 19th ward aldermen, took a liking to Anna because she controlled a lot of votes, a couple of thousand votes.
1,500?
Oh, easily 1,500,
Yeah.
yeah. And so by doing that, she delivered votes and in turn got jobs and services for those people that needed them in Little Italy and First Ward. So that was pretty much her life now, and I found most of this out, as Dominic pointed out. First of all, through the Chicago Tribune, they got some great pictures and some great articles. This again is an example of the pictures. She looks a little like John Belushi. But in this picture. But she was a pretty beautiful woman if you see some of the other pictures. So Anna died, not Anna, but Anna's first husband. Anna married Joseph Carlo. They had 2 children. He died in 1909. He was actually stabbed to death. Anna ran a tavern, and Joseph ran another tavern, and there was some sort of dispute. Probably somebody didn't pay their tab or something, and they had an argument, and one of the guys stabbed him. That's in the book, as a matter of fact. And so she married a second time, and I was really surprised to find out she married at a church called Old St. Peter's, and was at that time not the thing to do because most people were getting married at Assumption BVM or Holy Guardian Angel. Right, Our Lady of Pompeii. But she got married over there, and I've got sources. You know, I've got copies of all of those marriages and everything else. But the main thing that I'm trying to bring out in this article is that, you know, first of all, none of us never heard of her, but she did a whole lot for the Italian people back from about 1900 to about 1920. And I think it's pretty heroic. And for the reasons that I explained earlier, how she helped all those people and never looked for compensation, just, I'm here to help you. And so that's who I'm writing about, Anna Carla Blasi.
She was living about the same time that Jane Addams was active, and she she worked with women's clubs. Women's organizations were very important in bringing about reforms, and it was based in the family. They wanted reforms in the city because they wanted to protect their family for health and safety reasons. And so We have we've got a delegation from Amabile Santa Carita's family. But if any of you go ahead and tell us about Amabile.
In a sentence, I don't know. My name is Judy Santa Caterina. I'm Amabile's granddaughter. This is the rest of our family, a portion of them. My father, Lino Santa Caterina, my aunt, Mary Santa Caterina Julian, my mom, Arena Santa Caterina. I was fortunate enough to do my master's thesis at Northern Illinois University in the Department of Communication on my grandmother. And at the time thought, oh, well, this is kind of not the most scholarly of works. And then once I started, it was truly a labor of love. And Amabile Santa Caterina was a woman clearly ahead of her time. Not only was she a philanthropist and a feminist, but she was one of the first radio broadcasters, female broadcasters in the city of Chicago. She had her own Italian hour show with WGES, and then did a lot for the war relief effort in Italy. She was a very political woman. My grandfather Vincenzo was a socialist, and she did a lot to fight the fascist movement. In her later days, she was the forerunner of, my husband and I were talking about this the other day, one of her more popular projects was the Italian American Mothers Club. And she would read letters from, that mothers were sending and correspondence from their sons who were in the armed forces. Her own son, my father, was also in the armed forces at the time, and so she identified with those women. I find it very interesting that she would spend 15 minutes a day on her program exchanging those letters, and it was kind of the Facebook of her time. Truly, she was the forerunner of social media, sharing your most intimate thoughts with an audience and developing a sense of community. Later on, she became an entrepreneur and started Belgo Foods in Chicago, Illinois, where all of us had our turn working and stuffing ravioli and being dropped off at Mother Guerin High School in the ravioli truck, telling my dad to drop us off on the corner because we were so mortified. But she truly, truly was an amazing woman. She wrote her own autobiography that she was published in Italy. My colleague is working on a translation of that, and we are delighted.
Translation, we've got a copy in our library. This is Mrs. Santa Caterina.
And that's our Nonny.
She was somewhat larger than this, but not very big.
Yes, yes. And it's very interesting because she, when I started doing my research, I had put out a notice in the Franois and just asked people if they remembered her. And I was amazed by the number of people that responded to that and said she was our lifeline. And were very, very surprised when they saw her in person. In fact, my mother used to have to listen to her as a child because her mother said, no, we're listening to Amabile. And my mother thought, oh, God, who is this woman? You know, she sounded bigger than life. Little did she know she would end up being her mother-in-law. But she was a very diminutive person. And though diminutive in size, her character, the legacy, and her stature was immense. And we are proud to call her Nonny, Mom, Bisnona, and her legacy lives on in each of us.
Jeanette Risatti Viehman was our first library volunteer. She's served the longest time. She got the longest sentence. And she has really worked hard to perk up the library and to keep our library volunteers together and happy and productive. tell us a little bit about the translation process and about your impressions of Amabile.
Well, the first thing I thought of when I was studying Italian, they told us, translator, traitor. Because so many people translate books and they don't get the words right. You've probably seen some of those nice travel folders that tell you all kinds of bizarre things and descriptions are not accurate, or they use strength, like somebody just opened a dictionary and started to figure out what to say, and none of it makes any sense. It's just real choppy. So I thought, oh God, how am I going to make this sound like this lady really wrote? And then he tells me, Mrs. Santa Caterina's family is coming tonight. I said, oh God. So anyway, I hope I'm doing justice to your ancestor, your dear lady, because I've grown to really like her. And she was a little tiny person, but she was very feisty. So I will read you some of the things I'm translating. We're concentrating basically on her war efforts. As Judy said, she was a broadcaster, a very prominent broadcaster in the 40s, before, during, and after the war. So I'm just going to read you a few things, and these are basically in Amabile's words. She and her husband were very much anti-fascist, and as you know, there's always propaganda going on the radio, and when the war broke out, she was from Cupano, am I saying it right? Okay, that's near Vicenza, and that's pretty much in my area, where my grandfather was from Garda, so I've been all around there, and it's really a gorgeous area. But you know, there were a lot of problems in Italy at that time, and when she came over here in the 20s as a newlywed with her husband, and Italy was in bad shape, just probably quite similar to what it is now financially. But anyway, they came here for a better life, and they also had to deal with fascism in the U.S. So I'll read you a couple of things here. When they were doing shows at the Roseland Operetta Club and other places too, and then because she got this job at the radio station, they moved to town so they could be closer to the radio station, because she was taking streetcars and whatever to get to work, and she was still cleaning the house and doing everything, ladies, so then she was going to work as well. This is the tenor of the times. This is Mrs. Santa Caterina. I'll call her Amabile. When the first show sponsored by the Cupanese Club was presented, the Italian consul sent a reporter from Il Progresso Italo-Americano, which was a newspaper at the time, sent a reporter, or rather a spy, to see if we made anti-fascist propaganda. The impressions reported to the consul were excellent, nothing political or real show. We had real artists, real professional artists who were out of work at the time. So this is a little bit about her husband Vincenzo. The consul summoned Vincenzo. He offered his hand, unending congratulations, and then the best, putting a hand on his shoulder. You, Mr. Santa Caterina, are too intelligent to be stuck in your ways. You're a person who can work for us, so you can work for the fashion. And without hesitation, he put a roll of money in his hand. Vincenzo, without even looking at him, answered him back saying, "For my ideals, I left my mother, my brothers, and all that I hold dear in Italy, and I certainly didn't come to sell myself in a free country." And so, of course, Mrs. Santa Caterina was very proud of her husband, but she said this proud refusal was paid back by a humiliating search of Vincenzo's mother's house in Piovene in Italy. So their correspondence was controlled because he was not nice to the consul, the fascist consul. So how did she get on the radio? Well, in 1935 they moved to Chicago, and they had been with the Roseland Operetta Club, which was a local group that did performances of Italian plays in Italian and musicals and whatever, and we've got some pictures in the books, and we've got some things in our library on that you might want to look at. So Mrs. Amabile says, our emigrants spoke an incomprehensible dialect. One little old lady one day asked me how I knew the language. Another, hearing me speak Italian, asked me where I came from. From your country, I replied. You speak like your mother taught you, she replied in Venetian dialect, so in other words. I don't know Venetian dialect, but it's in there. Anyway, and she said, I listened to the radio and heard all these different dialects, and very few people spoke correct Italian, the real Italian. I wanted at least to audition, and I tried it. So she went to the office to a showing of Emilio Margiotta, who had a morning show. And she decided to take the plunge. So after the show, she went up to Mr. Margiotta, introduced herself, and said she wanted to work on the radio. After he heard her speak Italian and heard her offer to work for free, he offered to give her a try. So then she became a regular at 6 to 7 in the morning on WSBC. So she's getting up at the crack of dawn, feminist, working on the radio, going back home and doing various things for her family and so forth. So she says, we're now at the end of 1937, and after a month I was already on the radio with a morning program from 6 to 7, musical wake-up or musical alarm, however, it's Sveglia Musicale, directed by Emilio Margiotta. So she was already on the radio doing it that fast and that early in 1937. So here's a female broadcaster. So she was just doing little spots of advertising and brief discussions and whatever. And so there was a lot of things going on. They had several friends who passed away, and they rushed in and helped them and took care of the family business for the deceased people. And I know a lot of these people. One of the persons she mentions was our insurance agent. So I actually have a vision of who these people are. So it's really made a big impression on me. So anyway, going on to the railroad, on the radio, there was also ethnic cleansing on the radio. So the government was trying to control what was being said. Our American government was trying to control what was being said on the radio because it was wartime. And of course, you know, they don't want people to say the wrong things in quotes. We took up our activities again that we had neglected for a bit. At the radio station, I found a lot of new things. America woke up and turned around. Arnaldo Hartley, the programming director of GES, called me into his office and said we had to add an ad for American Family Soap. Somebody may remember that. A group of ladies were coming, and he says, I'm counting on you a lot. This would be an account for the station, but if you land it, there'll be a big commission. So let's clean house. I'll come to your house and we'll talk about this with Vincenzo. So what he meant by cleaning house was getting rid of all the fascists on the station. So they mentioned several people, and I will not necessarily go into these people, but, you know, everybody was different, and people thought they were pro-Italy if they were for their country, and they didn't realize what fascism actually was turning out to be. So it wasn't necessarily that everybody's political there. They just, for Italy, but they were fascists. Let's see. So I'm not going to read you this because it's pages and pages of stuff. But they had various people who were let go, and simply because they were fascists and they weren't going to look good with American Family Soap as their commercial. So anyway, she wound up getting the ad, but in the meantime, one of these people who was ousted insulted her and said, well, you're just a Veneta, and you're only good for going out and being a dishwasher instead of a radio broadcaster, because she had been in Amabile. Said, I replied that I would be proud to do it. And then I added that in the studio, I would look to change seats because I didn't want to sit where she sat. Those people went back to Italy and were never heard from again. She won the contest of getting the ad from American Family Soap, and then she moved to GES with Antonio Faustini for a quarter hour of American Family Soap. So she was doing that program, and then she disliked leaving the other Mr. Margiotta. So here's our feminist. So after the program from 6 to 7 a.m., I would run home, get the children ready for school. My husband was in the office. I hurry a bit at home, and at 9 I'm already on the way for the 10 o'clock program. It was not very far. When Faustini arrived, he had already had an outline, the records, etc. In the afternoon, there was other work. We had to freshen up the morning ads. That's amabile. We were already at the doors of war. Even our work was controlled. There was the opening order of the morning program with invitation to buy war bonds, so they had to broadcast certain things. Even Arnaldo had it up to his ears, and we all had to cooperate. There were 7 foreign programs on their station, and every hour was taken. We also had a visit from the FBI to the German programs. I think it was an ethnic cleansing by them too, as they had begun recruiting young men. Mothers were desperate because of all the young men in service. It was here that the Mothers Club was born. And as Judy said, this involved listeners who sought comfort. In a week we were loaded with letters. They were ladies who never set foot in a radio station, and this took us an hour of work. So all the correspondence kept us busy. We looked outside the station for a place to meet. One of us would be the secretary and would keep a list of the names of sons. Even if it would be outside the station, everyone would get a copy, and the spot wouldn't be over half a minute for the Mothers Club. It was like this that we entered the war, even with Italy, which had the courage to declare war on America, where millions of its sons found themselves as immigrants. But as someone said, wars are for the rich, the powerful, and the dictators. Here's a little bit about the event. You can shut me off whenever.
Let's go through this one, and I think we're giving a nice sample.
Here's a little bit about the Italian Community Our Mothers Club, which this turned out to be. Since Lino was in the Army, his mother was concerned about him, so she felt a rapport with these other ladies who were in the same boat. And people were getting drafted left and right. They still had the draft at that time, so they used to put stars in the windows and so forth. So Lino's father, Mrs. Amabile's husband, made him register for junior college, thinking if he had an education it would make a difference. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. She says he finished the year exactly in June for his first year of junior college, and he left in November for the war. This is Amabile speaking again. The pain was great, and it seemed impossible to be able to stand it. I escaped in my bedroom, and I couldn't keep myself up anymore. I have to be strong. Now I understand the pain of all the mothers, the letters of anguish that they wrote me. Tomorrow I would join them. I couldn't sleep, and I wrote almost all night, with tears that blotted the words. My husband came to get me and put me to bed. The next day on the radio, during the Mothers Club program, I was able to give a speech about which I amazed myself. Those words seemed to be written by someone else and instead came out of my mouth. The club grew. We asked the Morton Salt Company for 300 empty salt containers. It would take time, but we would prepare them. In the big store that was rented, I went twice a week, and then we made packages for our sons with cigarettes, sweets, and photographs. We worked together and were comforted during this work, as if the government were generous and wouldn't let them lack anything. To us, it seemed that things that were done by a mother's hands were more meaningful. Hartley, her boss at the station, encouraged me. He was happy with the number of members. He saw to everything, as long or as short as the war would be. In the end, there would be hunger and desolation in all of Europe, and you should be prepared for all the help that would be necessary. So eventually these 300 empty boxes arrived, sent by the Morton Salt Company, absolutely free. And some of you, if you took the train downtown, you remember that old building that said Morton Salt Company. And I actually heard someone say, "Where are the salt mines in Chicago?" Anyway. So the Morton Salt Company donated these boxes. Then they wrote on the boxes, "Give for the children of Italy," and made like little money collectors. And Mrs. Santa Caterina asked permission that they be placed in all the Italian stores, clubs, etc. So she formed a group called American Relief for Italy, and this consisted of collections of money and goods and whatever to be shipped to Italy. And the news was chugging every day on the radio, teletype, things that were going on, and it was very difficult to read this, and yet she was at one time just doing announcements, but she was reading the news so clearly that they decided to let her do it all the time now, because it was, she really found her niche. The program, she always read the news in English, but unless it was really important, then she read it in Italian. So, let's see what else. Let's see, okay, from New York, the appeals to be ready continued. We already had hundreds of cases, 22 pounds each, so they were kilos. The collection given to the children of Italy was doing well, and we even had money to ship them. So, she shipped all kinds of boxes to Italy, and they didn't all arrive. So, surprise, surprise, and some were diverted by the Vatican, even though they were destined to particular towns. They decided to send these to particular towns so that they would know that they actually were given to the people who used it, instead of just generally to Italy. And then they had the towns of their relatives, and their relatives could say, yes, we got the packages that you sent. So this was the plan, but as you know, anything to do with Italy, this doesn't always happen, where you direct things to the correct place. And of course, here's a little bit of Italian from Amabile. The Community Hour Women's Club had a branch in Chicago, and here too in Kensington, that met in the basement of St. Anthony's. Here you worked for the Veneto, for the 7 towns of Caltrano, Carre, Cupano, and so on. This group provided the boxes for the clothing, while in the stores were the collection jars for the children of Italy. The ladies worked well with great enthusiasm. Every month we tried to meet, since we had more cars available now, since they were more mobile. After the meeting, they offered pastries, frittole or maccafame. We talked of children in the army or relatives that we hadn't heard from over 2 years in Italy, our hopes and so forth. So there was a camaraderie with the ladies, but they were working for something for their own towns in Italy.
That's very rich stuff. And
Very warm person, very warm person.
And you know, certainly we're going to have a section on Amabile in the anthology, but there's so much more that we want to lead people to through the anthology. The anthology is a sampling to whet your appetite for the whole thing. And maybe down the road we can publish the whole thing as a book, a translation of her original book as an English language book. And or we can put big chunks of it on the web. So preserving the fascinating story of a female broadcaster during World War II and after. So thank you, that's great stuff. And not easy really to translate, as you know. Okay, our next presenter will be Judy Kemp. Judy has, I don't know what you're going to say, Judy. Tell us what you're going to do.
I better, because 2 weeks ago, Dominic said, I need somebody to do Lucinda Mays. And I said, who is that? He said, oh, well, she's an author. She's written a couple books. And I said, okay, do we have them? He said, well, we've got one, and I'll order the other one. I haven't seen that yet. But, so I started reading her book. It's written for juveniles. It's, you know, it's a younger audience, but it opens with the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in 1911 in New York, where she was living with her parents. So it starts out with a big bang, gets young people's attention. The problem with Lucinda Mays is that she is really elusive. I'm hoping that the second book will give me more information, but I have Googled her. There is a Lucinda Mays who's a horticulturalist and who's very active in publishing currently, but this Lucinda Mays is gone from us.
Yeah, she died in about 1985 or
Yeah.
something like that.
This book was published in '79, and I think she's got the second one from '82. I have not exhausted my resources yet, but thanks to AT&T, I have no internet this week, so I don't know what I'm going to come up with.
It's the
But-
sun flares.
Yeah, well,
No, somebody cut the wire.
but she writes beautifully, you know, for a young reader, this is a really nice presentation. She talks about emigrating when she was 5 years old. Her character, this is fiction, but it's based on her own life. And so she talks about living in Italy, in Basilicata, the things that her and her father had already emigrated to the States. Her and her mother had to pick shacks of wheat, pick olives that were left on the ground after the harvest, try to find snails to eat, anything, because there was no money, no word coming from her husband, who had gone off and had been gone for 5 years. And this was a very common thing at the beginning of the, in the 1900s. And so I will find something.
Well, her name
I'm
is
very
that.
tenacious.
She's supposed to be Italian,
Oh, she is, yes.
but it wouldn't be Mays.
I can't remember what her maiden name was.
I don't even,
Is it in there?
no, it's not listed.
That's why, maybe that's why you can't find anything, because of Mays.
Well, she wrote under Mays.
I know, but I was just wondering if you were trying to do the Italian history part of her.
Oh, no, no, no.
Oh.
I'm trying to do any kind of history.
Yeah, I knew her, and she lived in Glenview, I think.
Oh, really?
And she is, I don't know that she actually grew up in Chicago, but she spent a good deal of time in Chicago. So she's, we classify her as an Italian-American woman author who was based in Chicago for a particular time. And it's, I mean, the fact that she wrote about Italians is significant. And although I don't know if we would spend as much focus on Lucinda Mays as we would on, say, Tina DeRosa or on Amabile, I think
She
needs
certainly
to be included.
communicates, though, well to young people what it was like 100 years ago. And let me, she autographed this book, and she said, the family in this book had it a lot harder than we did, but overcame it all. Hope you enjoy reading it. A great resource for, a learning experience for a young person.
Okay. Calogero, have you have something you want to present at this time, or you want to wait for later?
I can tell you what's gonna happen.
Okay. Calogero has, you don't have to be a woman to contribute to this book, as you know. It's about women, and it's not necessarily by women. And I'm going to try to, I should mention this, Gloria Nardini. I don't know if you know Gloria Nardini. She's the author of a book, Che Bella Figura. And it was written about the women of the Mazzini Verdi Society. So she was like an inside mole, telling all the secrets of the Mazzini Verdi. It was very benign, very nice sociological, anthropological study. Anyway, she is going to be working very hard as far as the selection and the editing of the material is concerned. I'm sort of a traffic manager. And Calogero has written about Altamira. He's working on what, 5-volume history of his family.
Only working on the last one.
You're only working on the last one.
I'm on 4 already.
So we've got 3 minutes. What are you going to do with this?
Nothing. I'm going to, in my first book, Alta Villa, I spent about 6 or 7 pages on my grandmother, who, other than being the mainstay of our family, would not seem to be that remarkable until, you know, you dig a little bit. You find out the things she did in Italy. Her husband left her in 1920. Her daughter came around 9 months after that. She didn't see him again until 1948, after which time he died. Mysteriously. So she raised this child all by herself with nothing. Even though she owned a store, Mussolini closed ownership of anything by private people. So if you were a business person, which she was, she had an empty store. So what she did was she went and started running contraband. Because she had to feed her daughter and herself and pay her bills and all that. And she did very successfully, doing the train of Palermo to Bologna a couple times. She told me about it. That's the only fact I have, is that she told me about it. She had a nice apron, a nice 45 underneath it. Pretty cool. Then she came to America. 1948, she got a job at the Dormeyer Corporation on North Avenue. And more importantly, as anyone came over, and we all moved into the St. Philip neighborhood, as anyone came to America, they would knock on the door and pay their respects to Mama Maria. And Mama Maria would repay them with their job. So she was like, she became quite the politician, in that she would get you a job. When you came to America, she not only had your job, but in those days, to come to America, you had to have an affidavit of support, so that you wouldn't go on welfare when you came here. That's all history, literally, now. But, so she would sign affidavits of support and find jobs for people. Most of them, the men went to work at the Oscar Mayer factory on Division Street, Division. And the women went to work at Hart, Schaffner and Marx. Okay? And so my grandmother was like the female godmother, okay? Never took a dime from anybody. And nobody would offer it because it would be mala figura. So she died in 1979. And like I said, I wrote about 6 pages about her in my Alta Villa book, but that was another focus. I've since rewritten, and I might do a whole book on her. But you're going to get about 20 pages.
Okay, well, I know a good editor.
I'm a good editor.
I'm just kidding. Okay, now, Phyllis Shady has been active in the Italian-American women's clubs for, well, many years. And they have developed a program they call the Impreza Awards.
Right.
And collectively, those Impreza Awards represent something very significant that we don't want to miss in the book. You want to tell us a little
Well,
bit
since
about
1993, we initiated an award called the Impreza Award, and biannually we present awards to outstanding Italian-American women in various fields, medicine, theater. In fact, I thought we had interviewed.
She was an award
Yes.
winner.
Right,
Yes.
right, that we had interviewed you. And for most of those years, we had actual videos where, in fact, we have a recipient right here, Kathy Catronbone. 1991 was that?
No, 2001.
2001, where we actually, I interviewed the individuals, and a video was shot. We met at one place, it was usually at the Drake Oak Brook, and we had specific questions that we asked them, mainly a bio, where they're from, education, what it means to be an Italian-American woman, who was the most outstanding person in your life and what they meant to you. And we have a collection of these videos somewhere.
Well, we want them
Yeah,
for our
well,
library.
we'll collect them. However, 2 years ago, it became cost prohibitive to do the actual in-person video. So we have a video presentation, but it's just their picture and a bio.
Yeah.
And this has taken place, well, it always took place at the Drake Oak Brook. However, for the past 2 years, because the Drake Oak Brook is no longer there, at Medina Country Club. Our next impreza is August 18th, and if you have an outstanding Italian-American woman that you would like to refer to us, let us know. We take nominations, and then we meet, and we usually select about 6 to 7. We're desperately looking. This is Rosemary Rinaldo. She's president of the Women's Division at the Joint Civic Committee. And we're desperately looking for an Italian-American Chicagoland area chef.
Woman.
Italian. We really can't find one.
A
A woman. Right, a woman.
Well, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Someone outstanding. So,
Not grandma.
right.
Well, the Drake Casa Italia is available to you all the time
All
for your interviews. And I know someone will do them pretty cheap, Doc. Yeah, these days, you don't need all those bells and whistles.
Yeah.
I mean, to do a basic thing. And we'd like to have that
Well,
basic stuff.
You've been to
Yeah,
our
yeah,
appraisal.
I was at the last one, it was very
right.
good.
So any recommendations you have of anyone, let us know. Okay. I don't know if you, I did take a video with me of our last presentation.
Can we hold it, and if we
Oh,
have
sure,
some
you're
time
the
later?
boss, right.
Yeah, okay, no, I appreciate your bringing it, but as I'm looking around the room, it seems like almost everyone in the room has some contribution that we're gonna ask them to describe. Kathy, tell us about what we've discussed, or what you've got in mind for the book.
Well, I'm going to do a story
This is
about...
Kathy Katzenbode, by the way. She has a book on Taylor Street, the best-selling book on Taylor Street, the photographs and the Arcadia series.
Thank you. I'm going to do a story about Serafina Ferrara. And the one, and as Dominic knows, because he too has done a number of books for Arcadia. Arcadia is very regimented in the number of pages and the number of words on a page, etc. So there's all these wonderful stories. So, and I connected with Serafina, and I couldn't really do justice to her story in my book. So I'm so happy that I can write at length about her. And she was, as we had the Queen of Taylor Street, she was called the Angel of Halsted Street, and she helped so many people. And she was an immigrant, very quiet, shy, and ended up by her community work, as we've talked about, just people who just help other people. She eventually landed on the Lyric Opera Board, and that's really quite prestigious. And of course, she knew the first Mayor Daley very well, and I can't think of the name of it now. Maybe there was a store on Roosevelt Road. It was like a department store that everybody went to.
Philip and Son.
And,
Yeah.
what did they call it? Like you were going to 12th Street or
12th
something?
Street.
12th Street. The 12th Street store, that's it.
My grandmother used to
That's
call
it.
it Philippa Son.
Right.
Yeah, they could do
And so, okay, this is the woman that eventually was on the Lyric Opera Board. But when she first married Ferrara, all she wanted to do was go to the 12th Street store. What is this magical place that she kept hearing about? Because you know, you just kind of stayed on your block. So for her, her first big adventure was going to the 12th Street store. So that kind of information I don't have in the Taylor Street books. I'm really looking forward to.
So Kathy, what are your sources?
Well, right now I'm starting with 2 of her granddaughters. And
Good.
yeah. And then I'm gonna see what they have, and I'm gonna check with the lyric opera. And there's, I do have I think the picture of her in my book is with Mayor Daley. So, I'll go through the city.
She
sources
appears
also.
in the Tribune a couple of times. I think she and her husband are honored being great family people. Or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. So I know. So that's it.
And didn't she run at the end, didn't they have something on Chicago Avenue here near Austin?
Yeah, Chateau Royale.
the Chateau
Oh,
Royale.
right, they did.
And they would
They
have
did for
the,
sure Ferrara Pantheon.
Yes.
yeah, and they would
His
have
son
the,
just died.
Yes.
yeah. And they'd do the St. Joseph table. They'd get people, lines around the block or
They-
something. I think
Yeah.
they say so.
Right. So yeah. So.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you.
Now, it looks like we're heading toward, an anthology of biographies, but I'm hoping that we can do something, have a lot of biographical sketches, that's inevitable, but that we also have some studies that evaluate the trends, and the focus is more maybe sociological or something like that. I haven't come out with that yet. And I'm looking for someone to do Mother Cabrini in Chicago. The Mother Cabrini stuff that I've run across so far has been Mother Cabrini in the world. And when they mention Chicago, it's always one of the list of cities that then she established an orphanage in Chicago, New Orleans, Brazil, and blah, blah, blah. So they don't, I need to find somebody who can focus on her activities in Chicago. Maybe I just haven't run into.
Well, doesn't Angela Patron have all that information?
Well,
She does.
She does?
Yeah.
And she's part of the Mother Cabrini
Judge
Society?
Angela Patron.
Angela? Okay,
Yeah. Teresa Patron's daughter.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll keep that in mind. That's why we're here.
Well, because she did a talk once for us on Mother Cabrini.
And she's supposed to be the historian for Joint Civic, but that's,
Okay, well, okay, we should call on her. I'll trace her down an email if you have any contact information for her.
Yeah.
I share it with me, or you can talk to her too. Okay, I don't know. Pam DeFilio is a journalist, and both she and Kathy are patch editors. Pam, tell us about your proposal for the book.
Oh, well, actually, it's already written. It's on Tina Di Rosa, who's a Chicago Italian-American author. She wrote a book called Paper Fish.
Yes.
And you're familiar with it? Okay, it's all about, I guess, kind of somewhat fictionalized but kind of autobiographical about a young girl growing up in the Taylor Street neighborhood, probably about 8 years old, and her adventures kind of, she actually gets lost and then is found. It's kind of about that. It's about all of her family members, and it's a really lovely portrait of an Italian-American family. So Tina died a few years ago, about I think 3 years ago now, maybe 4. She died in an untimely manner at 62 from cancer, and it was a loss. But I was fortunate to be friends with her in the 80s, and so I wrote a reminiscence of her.
Next, do you folks have something in mind?
I have something about my mother.
And I have something also, as I told you before.
Okay.
Maybe I'll
Okay, yeah. Just briefly, this is Vincenzo De Vito. Vincenzo has been another long-time volunteer. He's here every Monday, and in the last that last Arcadia book that I did, we highlighted his family history, coming from Italy in the 1950s, and his father had been a prisoner of war in America, and his mother was a seamstress.
He was not a prisoner.
He wasn't a prisoner of war? Oh, he was a stowaway or something. Okay, so stowaway, and sent back and then came back legally.
Then he came back with it.
Okay.
So what I want to talk about is my memories or my remembrances about my mother. Her name was Maria De Vito, and she was born the 4th of August, 1927, in a small town in southern Italy called Bari. And she was the 5th daughter of a family of 8 kids. And when she was 5 years old, she knew she wanted to become a seamstress. And she would make clothes for little dolls, little dolls made out of wax. She attended grammar school and finished 8th grade. And then it was time to go to work in the family farm, where they were growing grapes and olives. And then in her 20s, she met my father. His name was Mike. He was a sailor. And in his stories, he came to the United States and spent a couple of years earning some money. He was a stowaway. He jumped ship. And he never reported back. But when he came back to my hometown, he was able to marry my mother. And she married an American, so to speak. Since my sisters, my mother's sister, had married him, she wasn't in America since 1948, and she had gone to live in New York, in Brooklyn. And in 1956, my parents applied to come to America, but the request was languished until 1965, when the laws about immigration were changed in the U.S. In the meantime, my mother went to school in a nearby city of Bari, and she attended the seamstress school, and for 2 years, until she became a fashion designer, and by that time she could give courses on how to make dresses, and her students to her students. And she did that for more than 10 years. And for that reason, she was called the maestra in town. And my friend, in the meantime, was traveling all over the world on tanker ships, and he delivered oil in the Middle East and North America and Japan. His trips lasted about 9 months out of the year, and I could only see him at increments of 1 year. And for this reason, he didn't want to do this kind of work anymore. So when the opportunity came to come to America, he grabbed it. And then in 1968, when the paperwork went through, my family was composed of 5 people, and we were able to leave my hometown. We left on the 10th of December 1968, and we arrived in Halifax, Canada, on the 20th of December, almost the day of the Feast of Marica Brito, which happens to be the 22nd of December. It's a long story, but I'll shorten it up. We stayed in New York for 10 days. We had relatives in New York and Brooklyn, and from there, my parents decided to come to New York, to Chicago, because we have relatives, my father had relatives in Chicago. And there's an episode where my mother went to work for the first time, and she had to take the bus, and the conductor says, California. And she thought she was going to dump it. She couldn't speak English at the time, so I thought it was a funny episode. And she worked for Kuppenheimer. They offered her a job on, there was a Simpson shop on Central and Belmont in the area, and the lady wanted my mom to make clothes, but she would get all the credit, and my mother would get something little, so she didn't take the job, and she eventually decided to go to work at Art Shop in March. So there was a lot of Italian women, everybody.
All women, all Italians and Jews worked in the
The whole 7th floor.
Seventh floor. And she worked there for 17 years. She became, when she retired, she was a quality assurance. But when was something about the job that she was a fashion designer in your country. Here she had to learn how to put stitches again. The industrial way. So,
Probably the hand stitcher.
So, and when she retired, she had a lot. When people heard about her, that she had retired, when people from my town heard about it, they would come over and say, would you please do alteration? And she did it, and then they said, oh, if you can do alteration, would you please do a skirt? And then from do a skirt, would you do something else? And I split it up, and eventually she was doing wedding dresses. And what she said, as long as I'm sewing, everything is fine. She liked it. She used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work until late at night.
She was busy.
And she liked to listen to Italian radio because she could work while she listened. So, she lived to the age of 70, and she passed away because of cancer. And so I condensed everything. That's it.
Italian women and or Italian Americans and the clothing industry in Chicago, Art Chapter and Marks more specifically. And there was a special unit of the garment workers that was Italian, local 70 or something like that. So that captures some aspect of the Italian-American experience and the women. Lou Corsino, how are you doing, Lou?
I'm okay.
You here to tell a little bit about something you might want to do for the book?
Just briefly.
Yeah, Lou is a professor at North Central College in Naperville. He's also a native of Chicago Heights. And he's professor of sociology? Yeah, okay. Tell us what you're thinking of doing for the book.
Well, Chicago Heights, so maybe that's the connection with Dominic here. It was a lot farther on the edge of the world ways back. Chicago Heights really seemed far away back then. Dominic asked me to maybe contribute to the book. And you know, most of my research is on Chicago Heights. That's where I grew up. And most of my research is on organized crime, the outfit. And when Dominic asked me to contribute, he originally said, maybe you can do something that relating to the outfit. But I think he said that with a good deal of hesitation, because it may not quite fit. And then, the more I thought about it, though, there are no women in the outfit. All my research is that women, you don't find a lot of women connected to the outfit. It was a very, women did play a small role in terms of contraband, in terms of going over to the old country sometimes and bringing some stuff. But women didn't have a big role, which made me think, where were the women? Where were the women? More generally, not just in the outfit, where were the women? Where did the women play a role back, at least in the early part of the 20th century? So that led get to a more general question, which I'm trying to pursue right now, is something about, and I'm a sociologist, so excuse this, gendered spaces. Gendered spaces is a term, and maybe to be blunt, a gendered space would be a bathroom. Only some women are, it is defined that only some men are, it's a gender space for a man, gender space for a woman. But more generally, where were the gendered spaces for women? We knew that there were gendered spaces for men back at the beginning of the century. The corner bars, the clubs, the barbershop. They were places outside the home in which men could congregate in the public and talk and have a role to play. But outside of the home, where were the women? I mean, I'm listening today. Women worked. Women worked in the church. And I'm wondering, at the church. But there's a sense that the church was, especially among the old Italians, the churches weren't the Italian churches. Some of the Irish churches, and some of the, I know my grandmother didn't go to church a lot, though there was that sort of, she was very religious, but it had that sort of mysticism, that sort of, the traditional church didn't satisfy her particular needs. So I'm trying to think, and I need interviews, I need to pursue this a little bit more. Where were the women, and how did the movement over, when the immigrants moved over from Italy, did they have the same sort of opportunity to be out there in the public that they did in Italy? In Italy, as some of you know, a lot of the women would sit in the piazzas, or they sit at their homes and look over the piazza, and that was sort of their public space in some ways. That was the way they could. But if you look at the architecture in terms of moving into Chicago, the architecture is different. You don't have the piazzas. You have the streets. So where did the women? Did the architecture in some ways contain the women? So again, was it a social constraint upon a woman? And certainly, as we talk here today, there's some economic constraints. Women had to be in the home because they weren't given jobs outside of some being seamstress and the like. So that's what I'm trying to pursue, I guess, over the next, I guess, couple months, and hopefully by June I'll have something more definitive.
Very good. Anybody else? Maria is going to do a little thing. Maria DeMarco has been around the Italian Cultural Center for quite a while. She helps us on Mondays, and she teaches Italian language to individuals and to classes, sometimes at Triton College. And she has started her own Italian language group that meets on the first Wednesday of the month called Cicciarone. Maria, you want to give us a little, you're doing a memoir?
Tonight I'm reading an essay, which is part of my memoir that I hope to put together soon. I have enough material now. I need to organize it and decide on the sequence. Anyway, this is just a small essay about it. So practically, it's not the history of other people, other times. This is my own history. I am first generation Italian in America. Okay, all of a sudden, the clouds dissolve. Heavy drops of water fall on my head, shoulders, legs. They multiply. They become thicker, heavier, louder. I'm absorbed by the rain, watching people covering themselves with newspapers, putting blankets on their heads, opening umbrellas. Then, as rapidly as it starts, the rain stops. Newspapers are removed, blankets are shaken, umbrellas are folded. Laughter and comments of relief replace the sound of raindrops. My hooded jacket has protected most of my body, but my legs are soft. I tell my friends I need a way to dry my jeans. Where are you from? A voice behind me asks. From Chicago, I utter, turning in the direction of the voice. I mean originally, says the man sitting behind me. From Europe? Europe is a big country. He said, yes, said country, not continent, I noticed. Where in Europe? Europe, I repeat, feeling the irritation and the rain to my toe tips. And you? I am an American citizen, he asserts. So am I proclaim. He won't give up, he persists. Europe is a big country. Where are you from, specifically? From Italy, I say. Couldn't you guess? I thought it was Italy, Spain, or Portugal. But where from Italy? He inquires. Where are you from? I ask, deflecting his question. You have an accent. A little, he admits. I'm from Mississippi. I have to leave before he would ask more questions. It really is exasperating me. But why am I so irritable? Oh yes, my jeans are wet and I am uncomfortable. But why am I so snappy? Is this the real me? I am at a beautiful Millennium Park in the midst of an amazing balance of nature and architecture. I have come here with friends to listen to Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5, and have a relaxing evening. I don't want anything to upset my musical experience. Where does my defensiveness come from? All the feelings are surfacing. Fear of being different. Fear of being rejected. I'm Italian, I explain it in social gatherings as to justify my accent during the first year I came from Italy. Someone who wanted to be friendly would say, oh, that's okay. What do you mean it's okay? I wanted to scream. I'm proud to be Italian. I was a teacher in Italy before coming here. I graduated the best of my school. A valedictorian, you would say. Instead, I sat there, silent, full of nostalgia, planning to find a solution to these situations. And a solution I found. For a long period of time, I avoided talking in such gatherings so that the people would not know I had an accent. Easy. I walked to the restroom to get some paper towels. Once there, I found only empty receptacles. But the room is full of joy. Several women are laughing and joking as they dry their soaked clothes under the hand dryers. One is driving a horse while wearing only her undies. I join in the merriment. My lower extremities alternate with the others under a collective dryer. Back in the pavilion, I'm no longer in a snappy mood. I'm immersed in the cradle of Beethoven's divine melodies. The cosmic language of music pervades me. I'm glad to be me, happy to be the Italian me. I even am reconciled with my neighbor from Mississippi. At the end, we speak briefly about opera. That's it.
Very good. That's just the beginning, huh? Okay, well, great. any, there are several others who wanted to speak. Come here, Gloria.
Hi.
Yeah, please.
I'm new to Casa Italia. Last year, I attended a wonderful program that was here with all the authors, the Italian authors. So it was great, and then one thing led to another, thanks to Judy and thanks to Dominic. I gave a workshop on It's Never Too Late, not to fall in love, but to write your stories. So we did that, and as a result of that, Franoy was going to feature the workshop. So I emailed Paul and I asked him if he, since he was going to be featuring the It's Never Too Late workshop, if he would consider publishing a piece that I wrote about It's Not Too Late to Become a Late in Life Author. And he said to me, he emailed back and he said, I don't accept general essays even though you're Italian American. And then this word, however, would you like to write a column on writing? However, would I like to write a column on writing? So that started it, and I have now a column in Franoy. It started in January, and it's called Write from the Heart. But listening to all these stories, I'm, thinking of my mother and my father. She wasn't a politician. She was just a great cook. She was from a place called, now they call it the Puglia region, but it was Mola de Bari. Nobody heard of Mola de Bari when I was growing up. And it's real interesting. I won't take a lot of your time, but we went to Italy in 2007, and I was on the plane, and there was an article in the Town and Country, and it was about Grace Kelly. But in that column, in that magazine, they had a 10-page story on Puglia. Who does Puglia in Town and Country? So I emailed them when I came home, and my letter is in Town and Country, and it says, on a flight to Italy, I almost screamed when I saw Italy Kicks Up Its Heels by Dina Kay about Puglia. After Positano and Capri, we would be going to Mola de Bari, where my parents were born. When I was growing up in the 1940s and 50s, this place was unheard of, and now it is becoming a tourist attraction. Articles about Puglia region have been popping up, but to have Town and Country feature a story about it is quite an honor. Puglia's food is outstanding. My mother was, we've heard about queens, well, she was queen of Barocchiere. She made the best, and I found out years later that they were called little ears, okay? And no one made stuffed calamari like she did. No one. I don't care where you go. They were just great. And one thing, I did not get the cooking gene from my mother. So I don't make calamari or arrocchiere. I'm sorry to say I didn't pick up the cooking gene. Our trip to Mola was fantastic. So again, what I'm trying to do is, if anybody, I do a program called Turning Memories into Memoirs. And if you wanted to go on the website, I found this great article about how to write a memoir, and it's by William Zinsser. But he said, his opening line says, one of the saddest sentences I know is, I wish I had asked my mother about that. My mother sailed back and forth 3 times, from Mola to America, from America back to Mola, from Mola over here. 3 times. Never heard about that story. Never. Because I think that generation just did what they had to do. They didn't make a big thing about it, She came here with 1 child, went back with 2 and was pregnant, and came back with 3. She didn't say how terrible it was, or she had 3. She just did it, okay? The other thing, this William Zinsser talks about his father, and he said it was a perfect task. What he was saying is, he wasn't a writer, so the writing was his own voice. When you did your memoirs, it's yours. You're not worried about if somebody's going to say, oh, she said that shouldn't be said. So memoirs are wonderful. I took a wonderful, wonderful course at the University of Chicago, and the woman said, get a picture. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. I have this little picture of this picture. This is my mother and me 55 years ago at my high school graduation breakfast, okay? And she said to write a story about that. So that's what you can do. Get a picture, write that memoir. Another great feature, I call this one the Omen Lady. Okay, she was the Omen Lady. And what happened was, I said, everybody went around the room and said what they were going to do. Who was going to be a nun, who was going to be a teacher, who was going to be a nurse. And I said, I'm going to live with my mother. Okay? Came true. I didn't get married. I didn't leave home. And she had a fit when I said that, but I didn't know it. And then later I found out the angel passed by. I said, why didn't you tell me that before? I would have never, so now. So these stories are there, and your memoirs are so, so important. So, again, another thing that you can do with your memoirs, do a timeline. Take a picture, write a little story. Take a picture, write a little story. It doesn't have to be anything big. Just take it along. Go get butcher paper and do that. Go from 1 to 5. Another one that I do is I have these wonderful cards from Paris, and they're like index cards, but they're graphs. So it's little boxes on both sides, and they come in 5 different colors. So I got 100 cards, all right? On every single card you will write your years. Dominic and I, 1940 was a great year. We were both in that one, okay?
How did you know?
Well, you
Did
just said
I
it.
reveal it?
Oh,
You announced it.
yeah,
Oh.
so, and I wrote mine, and I did 1940, 1941, not 43. When I came to 1943, I remembered my father coming home after having surgery. He had a patch on his eye. And I remember that, and my sister, so what happened is, my dad, there was a beer, they went to a christening and a beer barrel exploded. Okay, so Dr. Corelli was his doctor, and Dr. Corelli said to my dad, Mr. Valentino, we have to remove the eye, otherwise you're gonna lose the sight of the other one. And my sister, I called my sister to ask her how old I was. She said, well, you were about 3. She said, well, Daddy sat us down, and he said, I'm gonna have my eye removed. I cried thinking about it, because I didn't know that. He said, I'm going to have my eye removed, and I have to do it because I want to see you always. If I hadn't been writing those little yearly memories, I would not have heard that story when I was 66. So write your stories. No one can do it but you, and only you can do it because you don't want your kids to say, I wish I would have asked her that question. So all the best to you.
Again, very good stuff, and I'm sure that you give seminars from time to time, and people are always welcome to.
Yeah, I do turning memories into memoirs. If anybody wants to come to a writing group that I'm starting at Barnes & Noble on Sunday in Oak Brook, so.
Okay. I live very close to Oakville.
Okay, I'll tell you about it.
And let that be a reminder to you to look in your family archives, photos, documents, memorabilia, letters. I don't know if any of you know Vito D'Ambrosio, but his mother and father exchanged letters. We're working on a project that has to do with that. They exchanged letters back and forth. It was in the 1950s, and the mother wrote a fantastic letter about the loss that she was going to feel now that her son and grandson were going to America, and well, she wasn't. So, and we need those reminders, I think, of the cost of immigration, because so often we're celebrating the fact that Italians have done well. We came here and we worked hard and got into the middle class. Well, there's pain along the way, and some of this. Donna, do you want to say something?
No. No. I just had the phone calls, that was all.
Okay, Donna did some phone calling to get folks here tonight, and we want to thank her, Donna Tagli. And something, I would like, if someone were interested in doing the women from, my mother's hometown was Amazzano, the Amazzanese women and their folk lore, or their folk tales, or their wives' tales, and their, well, it could be their cuisine, or their celebrations. I would like someone to figure out the role that women had in developing the kind of wedding customs that Italian Americans have, or had, in the 20s, 30s, into the 40s. Now it's a very expensive business, but in the old days it was, it still cost some, and Italians who weren't very rich had elaborate weddings, and they saved for it. It was a big thing, and how did it become that? In Italy, weddings aren't necessarily such big events as they came to be among Italian Americans. Pietro, do you have a comment?
No,
Or?
not really. I came here just to hear it, but I'm inspired by many of the stories I've heard. It reminds me of some of the women that were important in my life, related and not. I remember, for example, speaking of Rosewood, I think I knew a Bobby then. Speaking of Rosewood, I know personally a woman who's in her mid to late 90s now, who was one of the first Rosie the Riveters, as it were, at Sherwin-Williams paint factory, Olga Durante, and she still lives in that neighborhood. And I remember her, in particular, one day going to school with this other lady who was the mother of a very good friend of the family who was involved in the bombing of Nagasaki. Fred Lee's brother and his brother were dentists. So it just makes me think of many memories that I have in my own life, and some of the women that played important roles. But speaking of gender spaces, the professor from our Central College was speaking of, I can remember, I don't want to offend anybody's sensibilities, but many a boring afternoon, late evening, saying the rosary at various houses in Pullman, with all kinds of women. So anyway, it just inspires many thoughts as I sit here and listen to some of these stories.
Yeah, the rosary circles. They're still going on. Now, I want to thank you.
I'm not a great writer, so I wrote a little something, but it's on my BlackBerry, so.
Okay, well, let the BlackBerry speak.
Come on.
Sorry.
I'm not good at public speaking, so I might start quivering, passing out, so. Right. Okay. Okay, my name is Mena DeVito, and I have some things that my brother just said, so I might have to change some things in it. Okay. The trip started on a cold winter day, December 10th, 1968. My sister Margarita and I dressed in a duplicate outfit because we were twins, living from the southern coastal city of Molodibari. In the summer, you could smell the sea salt air, and the sea never ended. Once my family boarded the train, we settled into our compartments and looked out for our aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends, and they were standing on the side of the tracks crying. I was not happy to leave our home, school, and family. I was sad and heartbroken, choking back tears. I just turned 9, and a few days before the trip on December 3rd, 1968. I shared my birthday with my twin sister Margarita DeVito. 5 minutes entitled me to be the older sister, and I used it to my advantage. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I vividly remember arriving in Naples and seeing Mount Vesuvius across the waters and thinking how beautiful and huge she was, and never seen Pompeii before I left. We finally arrived at the dock and we saw the ship. It was the Queen Anna Marie. She was massive, a luxury liner, a Greek ship. My parents already worried about the food. It wasn't Italian. We had 10 huge trunks, so much luggage. My mother's sewing machine was inside the trunks, which was imported from America, and it was a Singer. And she had her mannequin, And also, inside of trunks, they had hidden homemade olive oil, wine, Nutella, seeds for planting, and vegetables, you know, little plant stubs that are not illegal to be brought into the United States. And my dad had brought to my mother in Italy from the Suez Canal. And now I know why my parents were so nervous coming through customs. And also my father, Michael, and his brother, Giovanni, they were also nervous because that's when they got caught in the 50s, and because somebody had read him out and they had to go back. He was afraid of getting caught because, you know, going back to Italy. And the only reason why he ended up coming back here is because his name was misspelled in the paperwork. They spelled his name D-I-D-B-O, D-E-V-I-T-O instead of D-E-V-I-T-O. So that was by luck. Let's see. Well, eventually we came through, we came here because my mom's sister had called us from New York. On the ship, we found the movie theaters. I remember my sister and I watching the first American movie with the beautiful blonde actress Doris Day. I was hooked. And the song Que Sera Sera played, and the song became my mantra. That movie was our escape. We watched it over and over again, trying to see how they dressed, what they ate, what the towns looked like. You know, it was incredible. That's how we were trying to vision what America would look like, just from watching the American movie. Anyway, I was a very active little girl, which drove my twin sister crazy. She was a typical sugar and spice and everything nice. I was always asking her to run a race down the street or sneak out on my dad's new blue bike while I was asking her to keep watch on my parents while they took their afternoon naps. This was in Italy, and convincing her to join me in learning how to ride the bike. Those naps in the afternoon were a waste of precious outdoor time. If my mother only knew, it was worth the spanking. I could not understand why my brother was allowed to ride a bike and play soccer and I could not. Being active, I accomplished my third black eye by 9, running around and tripping over an umbrella and hitting the corner of the metal edges of a trunk before being loaded on the ship. My mother for a second thought I lost my eye, then smacked me for not sitting still. Well, anyway, when I tried to, goes on and on and on. But going back to the gender, I'm sorry.
Don't ever say you're not a writer.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful story. You got a lot to tell there. Great.
We just turned 8, well, we just turned 9. But going back to the gender roles, there were things that we were not allowed to do, ever. And my brother was allowed to go outside and play soccer. And I would sneak out and go play in dirt, sneak out and go play into a ditch. And I would always make my sister come and run. She would get hurt and I would touch her boo-boo because she was like, oh my God, my nails are dirty. Oh my God, my hair is a mess. As it turned out, I was very active, she wasn't. But in high school, my parents were livid because I wanted to join track and field and my sister didn't. So there goes the gender role. We were not allowed, but I joined a track team, made the captain team, and my father was livid. He would show up at school to pick us up and he'd be smoking a cigarette. And the guys would walk by, see us in short, my father would be swearing, Italian, wondering who was the guy that just looked at us. Even if they looked at us, we would be in trouble. We would sit outside on the porch. We lived on Park Avenue. We weren't even allowed to sit outside on the porch because if a car beeped, there goes the swearing. What's he doing beeping at you? It could be just a stranger just beeping, and we were not allowed to sit on the front porch, not allowed to date. So that was like in 1969 we came here, and this went on through all high school. We barely made it through prom. I could write a book. Yeah, it was fun. Do it.
Very good. Thank you all for coming. We've got some books here. You can, except for the black book and this book, they're all a free will donation. If you like the cover or want to give us a buck, please do that. Oh, and there are handouts outside that talk about